Good day, familia. This is your host, Rafael Collazo, and you're watching and listening to the Collazo Show and the Collazo Show podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Somewhere between Rachel Maddow and the Breakfast Club. Around the corner from me, bro, and Joe Reed. We provide commentary and analysis at the intersection of leadership, politics, and cultura. Thank you again so much for joining us. Thank you for watching us. We premiere the shows every time we air the show on Substack. So follow me on Substack if you want to be the first one to see the show. And then you can also see us on our YouTube page at The Collazo Show. And, of course, my audio files, The Collazo Show podcast, which now is video. So if you're on Spotify or wherever you listen to the podcast, most likely you can also see us. So definitely subscribe to us anywhere you can download a podcast, subscribe to on YouTube. Definitely connect with us on Substack. We take those conversations when we're not online, if you will, or at least on the show. Thank you again so much for joining us. Later on in the show, we're going to share some of the latest polling fresh off the presses of Latino voters, some insights I've got for you around that. Very interesting. And I want to shout out in the Cultura segment some sisters that are, forget all the political characters we normally talk about here, the sisters that are really giving South Texas hope in this moment, and some other folks that'll chime in on some of the cultural topics of the day. But first, familia, I wanted to talk about, as I've been thinking about what's happening with immigration reforms at Delaney Hall, I think we've kind of come to the real problem. And a spoiler alert, it's not ultimately Trump. That's the real problem here. You may have seen some tensions and violence. It was basically all I was doing following on a chilly Memorial Day weekend, what was happening in Newark, New Jersey, Brick City, specifically the Ironbound District there, Delaney Hall, which is a ICE detention facility that was actually reopened by the Trump administration, that should hold no more than 300 people, probably has over double in it now. And things have really escalated as conditions have deteriorated in Delaney Hall. A hunger strike has begun. Many of the family members who are local people are outside the facility literally day and night, demanding justice, demanding humanity, demanding that conditions improve, demanding that their loved ones have due process. And one of the things that we have been calling on for a year here at the Collazo Show family, that now you're really starting to see amp up. We saw, dating back to probably about a year ago, our local members of Congress, like Congressman Jimmy Gomez in L.A., Joaquin Castro in San Antonio, going to the Dilley detention facility, as you've seen often. Now you're starting to see it ramp up around the country in places like New Jersey. So we've seen, again, what we've been calling for. Not just one member of Congress, not just Senator Kim or Congressperson Espaillat from New York City, who was there yesterday at Delaney Hall across the river, but a steady stream, a consistent, at this point now, almost daily stream of members of Congress going to a facility because legally they're the only ones we can get in there to do federal oversight because it's their budget, it's their money, it's our money that's torturing people here on a daily basis in places like Dilley and Delaney. And now things have bubbled over. So you're seeing calls from the community for now Congresswoman, now Governor Mikey Sherrill to come to the facility. She did go to the facility. They denied her. As the sitting governor of the state where the facility exists, she was not the governor. Think about that. The governor of a state was not allowed into a government building to do oversight. People are getting tired of it. You're seeing a lot out in the street. I want to shout out this guy who I've been following for quite some time now. We're going to show one of his video interviews in a moment. Journalist and influencer Kevin Ortega Rojas. Follow Why Kevin on social media. He is actually following one of the many great influencers and community journalists that are following this issue. He's there to the wee hours. I would encourage you to follow him. You see some of the menacing behavior of these ICE officials towards people that are protesting peacefully and are simply just wanting for no more people to be treated like animals. And I want to remind people, if you don't think that's the focus of this, the dehumanification of Black and Latino people and people, non-white people, and just people, vulnerable people, people from all backgrounds. There was a Turkish gentleman just came out that was released from the facility yesterday. It came directly from his mouth. Familia. The current DHS Secretary, Mark Wayne Mullen, being addressed by journalists the other day in the White House over a kiss butt session, cabinet session with the president. Repeated reports by members of Congress, repeated reports by people that were being released from these facilities, repeated reports by family members getting intel and in their communications with their loved ones, repeated, credible reports of abuse, people being malnourished, pregnant women not getting medical attention, people that are hurt, various injuries not getting medical attention, people being slowly killed. His reaction was, they're just hunger striking because they're not getting their ethnic food. They should go back to where they come from. Now, in my opinion, because I'm not a fucking idiot, not only is the DHS Secretary lying through his teeth, his comments are just incredibly, not only just so fucking racist and dismissive of other human beings. He doesn't care that we're being treated this way because he doesn't think we're human. On the political side, this issue is bubbling up. Again, I'm really glad that our members of Congress, much respect to so many of them, but especially Senator Andy Kim, who got tear gassed. I mean, he was there all weekend, basically, trying to negotiate the release of some people that were detained that should not have been detained. We're not getting their due process, trying to negotiate some humanity here. And at least just getting the governor to be able to go through a government building. So we need to continue that. And to that point, we need that steady drumbeat. I love to see the New York delegation coming over to surprise support. We saw over a dozen, I think, members of Congress, senators go there the last 3-4 days. But, we got to keep living those lyrics. So for Governor Mikey Sherrill, who signed just days ago a law in New Jersey saying that ICE officials, law enforcement officials cannot wear masks and cannot push people around and attack them for no reason because they're innocent. They're peacefully protesting, as we've seen every day, every night at Delaney Hall the last few days. It's time to put some cuffs on some people, Governor. We mean business, we hold people to account, or we're just pretending. Or it's just, well, that's for poor minorities that we throw in jail and convict on things, or, people that do, regular people do incredibly egregious things, not for the rest of us. It's time to put those ICE agents in handcuffs. They're breaking the law. It's pretty simple. Ample evidence of it all over the place. So that's the moral clarity we need. We need to continue for our leaders to lead and to follow the law in this case, and to continue to elevate our collective humanity because, yeah, of course, gas prices suck. I feel it, fam, as much as anybody. Trust me. But these people are getting tortured, and that's what we have to address. And that has got to be, if we're really about humanity and if we're really about people, and God forbid, we're really about like being Americans together, that's what we got to focus on. To that point, I want to go back to Kevin Ortega Rojas. He was on a recent interview on the Ebro Rosenberg Style Show, talking about his journalism, talking what I've seen on the ground. And he just hit on a point. Kevin hit on a point, which is what I think is kind of the bottom line here in many ways, which I'll talk about in a moment. Let's hear it directly from independent journalist Kevin Ortiz Rojas.
Someone said, you should be ashamed. You should be ashamed. And this guy told her, tell that to my pocket. It was really crazy to stand there overnight, right? Like it's rain, it's pouring rain. We were there all weekend. It was freezing. And to watch all Black and Latino staffers come in and out of that place. And at one point, someone said, you should be ashamed. You should be ashamed. And this guy told her, tell that to my pocket as he walked to his car.
Oh my God.
These people don't care,
It breaks my heart, man. It breaks my heart, but I just cannot believe how evil it all is.
It's kind of something. Thank you, Laura, for saying that, because that's really what this is about. And I imagine laughing off torturing. Could you imagine waking up every day, going to work, and your job is to treat people that way? Not just anybody. By the way, what Kevin said is the point that I've been saying since the beginning of this whole Collazo show journey in this administration, is that they cannot do this to us unless we allow it, unless we are a big part of it. If none of those Black Latino DHS workers went to Delaney today, went to work, they couldn't keep the facility open. And you imagine you're a Black or Latino that lives in somewhere in the Newark area, Elizabeth, Plainfield, East Orange, maybe you live on the other side of the river, Brooklyn or something, and you commute every day, and your job for those 8 to 10 hours is to treat people as inhumanely as possible in those facilities. Deny them health care, deny them, just prepared food. They're giving them food with mold on it. They're denying women medical care. There's pregnant women. There's women that have had miscarriages in these facilities. And these are not just people. These are like people in your community. They're immigrants from Elizabeth. They're immigrants from the tri-state. Some of these people might be your neighbors. You might be related to some of these people. And you have the vergüenza to justify treating people every day like animals as your job. Well, I get paid. The sickness of selfishness is the reason we are a dying empire as a country. In my context, as a 50-something-year-old guy, I would argue politically it really started in the Reagan years. This move towards individualism. That was all the 80s was about. Self. Go for self. Make money. Go for self. It's why Trump became a national figure, because the country was looking for these, got really enamored with these bigger than life, rich characters and, super mogul guys. It's part of the connected to Trump and Reagan. It's part of the hip hop ethos, which was, New York in the 80s, which was the United States in the 80s, which was hustle for personal enrichment, take care of yourself. Fast forward, what is these decades and decades of this ethos in our country wrought us? We have too little sense of humanity. And we are not living with the golden rule, which is treat people how you would want to be treated. And I know a lot of this is policy. I grew up in North Philly. My people have been colonized by the United States for 122 years, 28 years. So I know the policy and the political conditions that create such desperation. Talking about the Melao short film we talked about last month on the show, where desperation because of colonialism and racist policies and people stuck in poverty make people make incredible decisions, incredibly risky decisions, as these ICE workers are obviously doing every day, selling their souls for pennies because they may feel like they don't have another choice. The selfishness, this lack of community we have is why we're here. And when Trump said, that's why I always go back to it. When Trump said Latinos were animals in 2015, that should have been it. But too many Americans, including too many Latinos, when they heard that, their reaction was, he ain't talking about me. And whether they admitted it or not to themselves at that moment, regardless if they say they're all Christian and religious and all that nonsense, I'm not saying that's nonsense, but being hypocritical is nonsense. He ain't talking about me really. So why does it matter? Why should it matter? So familia with this, that's why we start the show with the word. This show is about leadership first. Then we talk politics and other stuff. Because if we don't get this is beyond politics, this conversation. We need to regain that sense of community, that sense of collective humanity, that we're in this together. And God, when we've seen these little flickers of it in our society, and right after 9/11, even though Muslims were getting treated like shit, and people look like me, but for the most part, there was a collective. We're in this together. I've seen this as a Puerto Rican with the collective reaction to Hurricane Maria, where we all came together, and it wasn't about whether you're here on the island or here, or in the States, or your political ideology or anything like that. We were all one at that moment, truly. I think this is one of the reasons people love football and live sports, that collectivism. Look at what's happening with the Knicks and San Antonio Spurs fans, Oklahoma City fans. There's a collectivism. There's a unity. Because we don't have much of that left in our society. We're not going to survive alone. Going for self, as you can see from the president's attitude. Might work for him, but it's not working for all of us. And as you can see, we go for self. Doesn't work. You feed people moldy food. And even though you're alive, you're dying inside when you treat people like that for what's in your pocket. Obviously, we need to win the midterms. We have to do everything we can to save democracy. There was a court decision, flirting with this idea that Trump could literally decide who can vote by mail, who can't. But the only way we're really going to win back this country is coming together as people and understanding that we have to focus on a shared humanity because our futures are intertwined with each other. Let's watch this clip of a recent interview with my colleague, Mauricio Garcia, talking about a little bit about sort of the importance of housing policy. And this housing conversation is sort of a crucible of the kind of economic policies we need to move forward with. It's a proactive agenda so we can all benefit from this country, not just the wealthy. Then we'll come back and we'll talk about UNIDOSUS's latest voter poll on the Collazo Show, first on Substack, and anywhere you can download a podcast.
Like there's arguments out there that home ownership, we should have put so much focus on the home and purchasing the home. And, that's fair in some regards. But at the end of the day, we know just mere data that a Latino homeowner has the 26 times more wealth than a Latino renter. That's staggering. That's huge.
I don't think we can emphasize it enough. And I'm bringing it up not just for the reason Mauricio said, is that, look, most families, period, the basis of the wealth you are able to accumulate is through your home ownership. So but even more fundamentally, for our country to prosper, it is critically important that we are able to give Latino families the tools they need to buy homes and to get into homes. Welcome back to the Collazo Show. That was a recent interview with that I did with Mauricio Garcia, a real guru when it comes to how do we develop policies and programs that are going to open the doors, in this case, for wealth building in the Latino community. And, I would definitely encourage you to check out UNIDOSUS's National Economic Prosperity Agenda, because as we know, as I said in the clip, the bulk of most people in their lives are going to build wealth through home ownership. And we have to do everything we can to help Latinos gain on par with the general society around home ownership rates. And by the way, who's going to build these homes, fam? As I said in the clip, who's going to do the sheetrock? Who's going to be that bilingual, bicultural mortgage broker? Who's going to, who's going to cut the lawn once the home's built? I mean, it's kind of who's going to buy them? Who's going to put the mortgage on that puppy? It's going to be this emerging, diverse, young generation driven by diversity, driven by Latinos, driven by diverse women, especially Black and Latinas. So, let's get with the program, fam. On the politics segment of the show, just wanted to talk a little bit about a fresh poll that just came out. The new UNIDOSUS bipartisan poll of Hispanic voters, the road to the 2026 midterms. This is so exciting. The bottom line is Latinos ain't happy. I mean, that's kind of a big shocker here. 83% of respondents say they're struggling financially. Only 1 in 7 of us think we're stable when it comes to our economy. That's jarring, fam. 76%, 3/4 of registered Latino voters say they're paying attention to the national news and political events. It actually shows we're paying attention. It actually shows, though, that Trump has not hit the floor, and Republicans haven't hit the floor with Latinos, because 1/4 of us, they pay no attention. So we don't know who to blame. We just know things are screwed up. 67%, 2/3 of Latino voters disapprove of President Trump's job performance. And if you take Florida out of the mix, which is 50-50, actually pretty good for Democrats if you think about it. For Florida to be 50-50. It's really 70%. So if you take the Florida exception out of it, 7 to 10 of us everywhere else are not happy with this guy. So what's that mean when it comes to the political reality? So look, Democrats have a long way to go, but they're off to a good start here. When we ask Latinos around the country about their party preference in the congressional races around the country, which is going to be what's going to decide what may or may not keep the democracy afloat in the House and the Senate, Democrats have a 27-point lead over Republicans in that polling around who their party preference is going to be for those House and Senate races. Similar numbers, almost exactly, actually, when we drill down to specific races. So Tallarico versus Paxton, 54-27. But if you do the math, that means over a quarter of us haven't decided yet. So there's growth there for Tallarico and for Democrats. There's opportunity not only around the country, with that quarter they paid attention, we just talked about, to even build larger margins. Same, by the way, for Gina Hinojosa versus Greg Abbott for the Texas governor's race. Another race I wanted to note, even a bigger margin in terms of support for Democrats when it comes to another race that's really important for the Latino community, the governor's race in Arizona. Our current governor, Katie Hobbs, in Arizona, over former Republican congressman, or longtime Republican congressman in Arizona, Andy Biggs, who's a terrible human being, in my opinion. And so we've got so there's a lot of positive signs for the Democrats. Curiously, in those Senate and governor's races in Florida, the Republicans do have a 7-point lead, about a 7-point lead. Moody and assuming it's going to be Donald, we'll see, over the presumed Democratic opponents. They got a 7-point lead, but it's still early. And if you think about it, that's not too bad considering Democrats are so behind in Florida. But even amongst Latino voters, the Republicans do have the majority support so far in Florida. So still a long way to go in Florida. But as you can see from the numbers in Texas, that's already kind of flipped back. So I think the bottom line, a couple things to think about here. What this means for us is it's clear for the 2026 midterms and beyond, Democrats have a major opportunity to regain support closer to 2016 levels, which is really what they're going to need for the presidency in 2028, and to maximize this opportunity in Congress and state legislatures and governors' races around the country. But it's clear to me that if they just do a mediocre job, maybe they win the House by 5 seats or so, and we'll see about the Senate. But to really take advantage of it, there's a couple things they have to do. We have to empower the Latino community in this process. We just can't go seek their vote. So what do I mean by that? I think there's 2 people that Latinos really have to elevate in this process. There's many rising stars, from the AOCs, the most obvious ones, to, people like our new Congresswoman, Ana Lilia Mejia, out of New Jersey. We hope that Randy Villegas wins that primary in Central Valley, California. A lot of rising stars. But, you want us to get excited? Let's talk about the idea that the 2 largest states in the country could have Hispanic governors. We'll see what happens in California. There's a good chance after Tuesday, the path will be pretty clear for Javier Becerra to be the next governor of California, depending on who finishes the top 2. And by the way, familia, we have a strong Latina member of the Texas state legislature in California, Gina Hinojosa. Nobody's talking about her nationally. Who's running against Governor Greg Abbott? Who has done more harm to Americans other than Trump in the last decade, 15 years in this country than Governor Greg Abbott? He literally freezes people, has denied hundreds of thousands, if not over 1 million plus Texans health care for no reason other than be cruel. Very low investments, healthcare access, children. I mean, he's just been one that fomented the issues with busing immigrants at very strategic locations a few years ago. He just, the Uvalde situation, he's just been a horrible governor. But because people feel like, oh, he's quote unquote so powerful, they're not digging about. No, we can do everything we can to get Gina, I'd like to be our governor in Texas. Let's get a strong, emerging Latina, qualified Latina be governor of that state. And, people are the political class kind of looks at Gina as kind of like an ornament. She's going to be an accessory, like a tag along for Tallarico, because we got to focus on him to be the senator. But in terms of the day-to-day impact of the life that Texas lives and Hispanic Texas live, the governor is much more powerful, much more important day to day. We should support both of them, but why don't we elevate both of them in an equal way? Instead of saying Tallarico's the new white Democratic savior and co-starring the one person running for governor who's like an afterthought. So if you want to see Latino enthusiasm for this race, really Latinas, and the Democratic Party wants to start building back that faith that they've lost over a decade plus with the Hispanic community, really everybody. Why don't you invest in that woman's race? Or why don't we support her in her leadership and the countless others? We have to, and then on the practical matter of it, and I just got off a call this morning to kind of illuminate this a little bit more. But, we have to kind of get back, as I said in that New York Times article about our national coalition with several other Hispanic groups, LULAC, Latino Victory, Mi Fe Vota, and UNIDOSUS Action Fund that we're helping to lead to organize Latinos mobilizing around the country, is that we've got to get back to the basics and provide people the tools they need to vote. So, yes, we got to tell them, persuade them about these candidates, educate them, not just about why Trump's so bad or the complicit Republican congressperson that's voting against your interest every single day and not doing anything about what's the rampant corruption and literally stealing that's taking place out of our treasury, and not doing anything about it. But what not only is the vision for a better United States, but also just practically, how can we help you make a plan to vote in the fall? Because you don't know the rules. You may not have voted in a while. You may be a first-time voter. You may have never voted in an off, year cycle. You just moved to Pasadena, Texas, and you don't know where your polling place is. You don't know the rules about where the early vote is, what your options are for early voting by mail. Helping people with a plan to vote and assuaging their concerns about the intimidation threats that are out there will go a long way in helping us maximize this moment. And we just got to keep living the lyrics, fam. And I go back to this New Jersey example of Governor Sherrill. We either have a law on the books that say these law enforcement agents can't wear masks and grab people that are peacefully protesting out in the street. Oh, they yelled at you? No, that doesn't give you justification for hurting people and grabbing people. We either have laws or we don't. So Governor Sherrill, what are we doing? So we got to keep living the lyrics. So we have 6 months, right? Not quite. And I don't know what to tell you. Our democracy's hanging by a thread. So we have to do all we can and engaging. But you can see from the polling that UNIDOSUS did and encourage people to check out all the crosstabs. You can see there's so much good stuff on there, fam. I'm going to put the in the Chiron here, the lower third. Just go on social media at We Are UNIDOSUS. There's stuff you want to know about how Dominicans are thinking about voting, people in the southwest part of the country. There's so much great information, issues, how they want us to handle immigration reform. Definitely check out the full poll, full transparency with all the crosstabs on social media at We Are UNIDOSUS. Gonna take a quick break. We're gonna listen to a best of clip. Had a great conversation with an incredible advocate, Ada Fierro, Venezolana out of South Florida, one of our leading Venezuelan American progressive voices in this country. We talked about some of the cultural stuff as we transition to the Cultura segment entre the joined cultures de lo venezolano y lo boricua. Had a wonderful conversation. Let's hear from Ada Fierro. We'll be back with the Cultura segment here on the Collazo Show. Always premieres on Substack, and follow us on YouTube and the Collazo Show podcast. We got coming up in March, the World Baseball Classic.
Yes.
Venezuela and Puerto Rico, two of the baseball Caribbean powers, along with the Dominican Republic and other nations.
Mm-hmm.
Ade, who's your team in the Winter League in Venezuela? What's your team?
In the Winter League in Venezuela,
Sí.
Leones del Caracas. But
Leones del Caracas.
Right now, I'm not very proud. They did awful. They
did bad this year?
In the worst way possible. But I am Leones del Caracas. I die
there
with
you go.
him. Yes.
So I'm Criollos de Caguas, which is one of the most championships in the Winter League in Puerto Rico. I guess Caguas would be kind of like the the other big city or one of the other big, like a Maracaibo kind of thing, equivalent. And I am a sports fan because 100 years ago, literally, my grandfather, Don Rafael Collazo, grew up across street from that stadium. So literally, he was a fan from day one when it started 75 years ago, and a lot of history there. My grandfather would told his stories at that time. You know the history that because the Black American players couldn't play in the American leagues, you know, in the major leagues with the white guys, when they weren't playing in Negro leagues, they would go down to the winter leagues and play in Latin America. So my grandfather saw Josh Gibson and all these amazing players. So when I was a little kid, my life was salsa, you know, because my dad was the one that threw all the dances and talked about the salsa. And then we started getting in the 80s, the Colombian immigrant population that were big salseros. They gravitated to my dad because he was the radio guy and the music guy. And so, you know, when I thought about that and I thought about that history, and it put a smile on my face when I'm flipping channels on New Year's Eve. And I forget, it was one of the Spanish language New Year's Eve shows. Oscar de Leon, 82 years old.
Oh yeah, he was. He was.
He's still fantastic.
Yes. Oh my God.
He's still going strong.
The eyesight and everything, and he's still doing it.
He's still amazing. For people who don't know, Oscar de Leon is the GOAT Venezuelan salsero. And let me tell you, and I'm saying this as a Puerto Rican that is the biggest Puerto Rican salsa snob there is. Oscar de Leon is in the conversation for greatest salsero ever. That's how amazing that man is in his 80s.
He's amazing.
Still going strong. The greatest bassist, stand-up bassist ever. Incredible performer in his 80s, still strong. School these people. La música salsa, la música tropical y Venezuela, I mean, it's part of la vibra de ustedes. It's incredible.
La salsa brava.
Claro.
La salsa que
talking.
se va, la salsa that you dance like really close to your partner. Oscar de Leon is not just a singer for Venezuela or a salsa singer. He's a cultural treasure. And for me, it's a cultural memory. Since I have memory, I remember being really young, dancing on my grandmother's living room during Christmas or any party.
Welcome back to the Collazo Show. Ade Ferro is definitely one of my favorite guests. I love having her on the show, and you can go into the archive. She's been on my show several times, and Ade, you know, we talked in that context. We actually that conversation spun off from an initial conversation about a few months ago, the invasion of whatever, you know, all-inclusive trip, the way Trump likes to talk about it in Venezuela for the U.S. government, and we talked about kind of U.S. politics, immigration stuff. Ade's one of the realists in the game. So thank you, and definitely check out our other Cultura content and anything Ade Ferro. Familia, you know, there's a lot of people inspiring the Latino community right now. There's a lot of good people out there, you know, whether it's, you know, our political heroes. Some of these people are making us hopeful around the country, the AOCs, the Talaricos, everybody, you know. But let me tell you, fam, the people that are giving us as much life as anybody are these young ladies right here. People have not seen it. The San Antonio Spurs are in the NBA conference finals, the Final Four. They have this incredible, you know, once in a lifetime athlete, Victor Wembanyama. People don't follow it. A black Frenchman that is just, I mean, he's 7'5" and he's athletic, and it's really hard to stop. And they're having a great series with the Oklahoma City Thunder, the two of the three best teams. I think the Knicks will give either one a run. But anyway, so in the middle of this incredible tense atmosphere, some of the biggest moments and games and events in San Antonio in any given era, these lovely Salesian nuns come to the game. They go pray with the team. They bless one of the centers, Luke Cornett. You know, I guess he's Catholic. And they have given us their local community folks. And they were asked, you know, the Spurs hook them up with decent tickets, decent seats, you know. And they were asked, like, why are you here? I said, well, our community, the children, the people that we serve, this gives them hope. This team gives them hope. This team gives them joy. This team is a big part of our community. And so why wouldn't we be here? Because we want to make sure they're healthy and safe. It was just so wholesome. Such a wonderful, tender moment. So cultural. And I grew up as a Catholic school kid. So many of us did. And nuns, teachers, you know, they were a big part of our lives. So just a really lovely, lighthearted, warm moment. There was actually a lot of IG stars too. They were getting OnlyFans stars there. A lot of polarity there with San Antonio. Those pictures aren't as appropriate for this program, but there was a lot going on in the crowd. Definitely the most interesting NBA crowds. New York, the Knicks are cool. The celebrities, LA, everybody loves the celebrities. I love the celebrities. I wish more Philly celebrities went to our Sixer games. But the San Antonio crowd has been definitely the most interesting. And the other sister, hermana, that I want to shout out in the Cultura segment, RaiNao. People don't know. Most people know RaiNao as the vocalist that did Perfumito Nuevo on Bad Bunny's Opus. Debí tirar más fotos. People know that song. People know that watch the clips or attend any of these concerts on his tour. He's currently in Europe right now. He just finished up in Portugal, going to Madrid this weekend for a couple of weeks. RaiNao performed frequently on this tour, that song with him. But if you really deep dive into sort of the Puerto Rican music scene, RaiNao has been a fixture probably close to a decade now, just grinding it out. It's part her, a little Erykah Badu, a little Gwen Stefani, a little, there's a lot of influences there. But the bottom line is that she's an incredible showwoman, and just came out back-to-back, fam. She had a Tiny Desk concert, which was insane. You got to peep RaiNao's Tiny Desk. Unbelievable. And then a few days later, she came out with her new album, Malcria. And Malcria was released through Rimas Entertainment. That's Bad Bunny and Noah Saad's company. And she's exploring Caribbean music and emotional and sensory storytelling. 16 tracks. It blends guaguancó, bomba, jazz, reggaeton, experimental sounds. RaiNao describes as deeply personal, intuitive interpretation of Caribbean music. RaiNao, I would just listen to it. It's not what you think it's going to be. This is not reggaeton. This isn't Latin pop. This is truly artistry blending the influences that have impacted Puerto Rican music forever, not only on the island, but in the Caribbean context and in an American context, in a sense, with the jazz and some of the other particularly Black music art forms from this hemisphere. So just kudos to RaiNao, a real character, she's just one of a kind, a true artist, and really enjoyed not only her performance on Tiny Desk, but her team and her band, and really enjoyed this album. So definitely check out RaiNao, and definitely continue to follow and support the Collazo Show. Again, subscribe. We appreciate your subscribing to the show on Substack, YouTube, the Collazo Show podcast, and continue to follow us and interact with us. We're now hard to find on social media. Let us know what you think of the show, what guests you'd like us to see next week. We'll be we're at the home stretch of the California governor's race. Looks like from all the polling and everything I see, Javier Becerra looks like he's in pole position right now to finish first. We'll see who ends up in the top two. We're going to have a guest to sort of analyze what happened and what's next for California politics, which I think you'll enjoy. And there's a lot of other great people coming up in the show. Thank you all so much for watching the Collazo Show, listening to the Collazo Show podcast. And let's continue to think about how we can maintain, survive, and recoup our collective humanity in this country. Have a great day.